Life has a talent for steering people into unexpected situations, and not always the graceful kind. These stories capture the moments when everything suddenly becomes 10 times more uncomfortable, and all people are left to do is wish they could hit undo. I was at the water park with my new boyfriend when a man suddenly approached me and whispered, "You need help, come with me. How could your man not warn you about this?" Surprised, I followed him. I knew it wasn't my period. He took me to the bathroom and asked me to turn around. I did, confused. Then he pointed at the back of my swimsuit. There was a huge smear of chocolate ice cream, completely melted from the heat, right across my lower back and bottom. My boyfriend had been eating it earlier, and I must have leaned against him. I felt mortified, but the man handed me some wet wipes and said, "Happens all the time, just didn't want you walking around like that." At the vet's office, my dog decided to let out the loudest fart possible while everyone was silent. Everyone turned to look at me instead of her. I once accidentally sent my grocery list to my tuition group, and later, in panic, I tapped the delete only for me button instead of delete for everyone. There was nothing I could do now. My debit card was declined at the grocery counter because I'd forgotten to check my mail for my new card. The woman behind me in line was from a well-known charity group for starving kids and insisted on paying for my groceries. It was the most uncomfortable feeling in my life. I went home and donated to the charity, but I'll never forget. My girlfriend's parents came over for Christmas last year. They gave us matching pajamas. Yeah, I know. They wanted us to wear them that night, but my trousers were definitely a size or two too small. I went downstairs in the new pajamas and decided it's time to sit. The entire crotch seam exploded open, revealing far more of me than anyone should ever see on Christmas Eve, right in front of her mom, dad, brother, and sister. I went to the Museum of Illusions in Miami while on vacation with my son. The guy who took our pictures had to text me for something after the session. Later, I was trying to text my son to come down from the hotel room and walk on the beach with me. I didn't look at the recipient of my texts and accidentally sent a bunch of texts to the guy from the museum earlier that day. I realized my mistake when he texted back saying who he was. He didn't seem too annoyed by it, but I felt very embarrassed and deleted the whole message thread from my phone so I wouldn't make that mistake again. Let me tell you something that happened once that embarrassed me. I had liked my senior for 3 years, and one day I finally got up the courage to smile, slip the letter into his shirt pocket, and leave in a hurry. When I came back, I realized that the letter to him was still in my pocket and the tampon was gone. Quite a few years ago, I was spending an afternoon with my best friend who was house-sitting for a wealthy family with a pool. We were tanning topless, and I decided to send a pic to a guy I was dating at the time. About an hour later, a friend messaged and said he was surprised that I'd have the courage to post something like that on my Facebook profile. I wasn't sure what he was talking about. And then it clicked. The photo I thought I had sent through text to my guy at the time had in fact been posted to my Facebook profile, where everyone, including my grandparents, could see it. To make matters worse, I couldn't for the life of me get connected to the Wi-Fi and was having a very hard time deleting said picture. Won't likely ever live that one down. When I was in my early 20s, I worked in a grocery store in a small town. A guy who worked there has parents who are very attractive. They were divorcing at the time. I made a comment one day about how hot his dad is and said, "Better watch out, I'm gonna be your mom soon." He told his dad what I said, and a couple of days later, when his dad was in the store, he looked me dead in the face and said, "Sup, mama?" The dude was behind him, hyperventilating with laughter, and I wanted to absolutely die. I was at a week-long training in another city with a coworker for peer support certification, basically working with people who struggle and who need casual, friendly assistance with a variety of things. We had one of those break the ice exercises on day one. I ran to the bathroom when they explained it, and when I got back, people were writing on note cards. I asked my coworker what they were doing, and she said, "Write a secret." The job deals with a lot of emotions, and personal experiences with mental health struggles are a plus, so I thought this was some soul-searching exercise or something, like we'd burn them at the end. I write that I feel like a terrible father and sometimes regret having kids. I fold it up and then pocket it. Then I hear, "Okay, I'm gonna collect them now." I'm thinking, is this a trust thing? Okay, whatever. He then puts them all in a bucket and shakes it. So he pulls the first card and it reads, "I was bitten by a shark," and everyone points to this one guy and he's like, "Ah, you got me." Then he reads more, and these are some weak secrets, I'm thinking. Never been to Canada, I was in a movie, etc. After each one, the group identifies the writer. Of course, mine is the last one, and my coworker goes, "I guess we know who this one is." I had to sit and listen to this dude read my secret to a room full of silent, stunned people. Turns out we were supposed to write a fun fact, and my coworker misworded it. We were in the pet food aisle of a grocery store, and we were talking about how our dog was very old when he died, and how our cat was quite old, and we weren't sure how much longer he would have to live. This older woman was sharing the aisle with us, and my 4-year-old son turned to point at her and said, "So this lady," and I had to scoop him up very quickly before he could finish his sentence. At work, I accidentally got an email clearly not meant for me. It said, "Meet me in the storage room at 3. Don't tell anyone." I stared at it for 10 minutes, debating whether to ignore it or go check. At exactly 3 o'clock, I walked toward the storage room, opened the door slowly, and the first thing I saw was someone holding confetti cannons and a birthday cake. All of them pointed at me. Someone shouted, "Wrong person!" but it was too late. They all went off. I saw my husband at the mall, ran up behind him, hugged him tight, and said, "Guess who?" He didn't respond, because it wasn't him. It was a man who looked terrified. His wife came out of the store and said, "So this is the coworker you keep mentioning." At this moment, my brain decided that the best thing to do was to double down and say, "Oh, great, you're both here. Let's all talk about this." The wife blinked, the man blinked, I kept going. "I'm married, I have 3 kids, I don't flirt, I barely talk to people, I don't even go outside most days. Your husband is safe, I swear. I'm leaving now because my armpits are sweating." Then I attempted a dramatic exit and tripped over a mall display of discounted socks. Still feel very uneasy when I think about it. I was leaving the grocery store when I heard someone yell, "Stop him!" Everyone turned toward me. A guy sprinted in my direction, eyes wide, pointing straight at me like I was the villain. Before I could say anything, he grabbed my cart and said, "Don't move." Then he looked inside the cart, looked at me, and whispered, "Oh no, you're not the guy. But now we have a problem because I already yelled at everyone to stop you, and I can't walk back empty-handed." He grabbed a cucumber from my cart, loudly said, "This is evidence," and walked away confidently, while everyone was staring at me. One summer, a friend of mine went to work construction to save up for a computer. The work wasn't too hard, just 6 hours a day. One day, they told him they needed someone to help at another site. So he goes there, finds the workers, and says he was sent over to assist them. They told him to carry buckets of mortar for the full 8 hours. He was exhausted, but thought they'd pay him extra at least for the overtime. The next day, he shows up at his regular site, and it turns out that there were 2 buildings next to each other being constructed by 2 different companies. He had helped out the other company for free. The foreman had a good laugh and ended up counting the previous day's work for him anyway. In college, I worked as a coat check attendant in a restaurant. Once, a group of businessmen in leather jackets came in. We asked them to check their coats. One guy very reluctantly took off his jacket, handed it to me, and gave me $50. He said he would give me the same amount every hour if I didn't leave the jacket for a second. In the end, they stayed for 4 hours, and he kept his promise. I never found out what was so special about that leather jacket, but I was curious. Oh yes, very much. Money, maybe. I work as a dispatcher with a team of drivers. Sometimes it was necessary to call drivers in for extra shifts. So one day, the wife of one driver called me complaining that why I always called him Vinny and that I had scheduled him for a night shift again. I replied that no one had called him in for a while. Her response was, "Then where is he?" To which I said, "Look for him yourself, I don't know." From the life of a social worker, there was this elderly lady who needed to be accompanied to a taxi and taken to the clinic. The taxi was already waiting, and the social worker was tying a scarf around the lady's head. But the elderly woman refused. She insisted that she would only go in a beret and not under any circumstances in a scarf. I worked for a cleaning company. Once we went to a house and unloaded our gear there. The owner approached us and asked to hand over our phones. I handed mine over, wondering who this important person was. It all became clear as soon as I stepped inside and saw piles of garbage everywhere, scattered belongings and stained furniture. But there were also rooms that were spotless and shining where cameras were set up. We were cleaning for a rather well-known blogger. She tells the entire internet how happy she is and that she can manage absolutely everything, even on maternity leave. I worked for a cleaning company. Once we went to a house and unloaded our gear there. The owner approached us and asked to hand over our phones. I handed mine over, wondering who this important person was. It all became clear as soon as I stepped inside and saw piles of garbage everywhere, scattered belongings and stained furniture. But there were also rooms that were spotless and shining where cameras were set up. We were cleaning for a rather well-known blogger. She tells the entire internet how happy she is and that she can manage absolutely everything, even on maternity leave. I got a job as a general helper at the technical school and often helped an elderly carpenter. He was of retirement age and moved at a leisure.
Most travel stories worth telling don't start with a perfect plan. They start with something going sideways, a stranger appearing out of nowhere, or a moment so strange you couldn't have scripted it if you tried. The travelers below didn't go looking for anything extraordinary. They just went somewhere, and something found them. I was at Uluwatu in Bali when a monkey came from seemingly out of nowhere and snatched my glasses off my face. My vision is terrible, and I would have been screwed without them. My initial reaction was to approach the monkey, but it bared its teeth at me, so I quickly backed off, not relishing the thought of injuries and rabies shots. Luckily, a local saw this happen and traded the monkey a piece of fruit for my glasses. I was in a small coastal town in Portugal and followed a group of locals carrying accordions toward the docks. Ended up at a neighborhood sardine roast right on the seawall. There were maybe 20 people, plates of grilled bread, and music playing until the stars were out. I didn't understand a word of the lyrics, but they kept handing me food and teaching me the steps to a local dance. You can't book that kind of magic on TripAdvisor. I got off the train in this tiny Italian village and was completely turned around trying to find my guest house. This older guy on a beat-up bicycle saw me struggling with my map and just signaled for me to follow him. The 5-minute walk turned into a full-on neighborhood meet and greet. Every few houses he'd stop to shout something in Italian, introducing me to his brother at the butcher shop, a cousin hanging laundry, and eventually his aunt sitting on a porch. By the time we actually got to my door, I'd met half his family and had 3 people tell me exactly where to get the best cannoli. He wouldn't take a tip. He just seemed genuinely happy to show off his town. It was the first time a place actually felt like home instead of just a spot on a map. In Costa Rica, at a wildlife center, the path between the dining room and the building that houses guests winds through the jungle. At night, it's pitch black. One night, while going to the dining room, I saw a pair of bright yellow eyes staring at me from between the trees. I could see nothing else, but saw some movement around the eyes. I thought it was a black jaguar and screamed my head off, calling for help. That was real, primordial fear, the kind of which I've never experienced. My scream startled the animal and it disappeared, but a moment later it reappeared by my side, breathing heavily. "Lo siento, señor," it said. I let out another scream. Well, it turned out to be a local man apologizing for scaring me. I was on a train from Prague to Paris and realized about an hour in that I'd boarded the wrong one. Not the wrong direction, the wrong country. I ended up in Dresden with no German and a return ticket that was very much not valid. A retired school teacher at the station bought me a coffee, drew me a map by hand, and waited with me until I got on the right train. I still have that map. I got chased by a huge seal in Ireland. A bit more to the story. We visited a beach with friends. It was beautiful, and there were 2 biggish hills surrounding the beach. I went to the beach directly, my friends on top of the hill. I saw in the distance a seal coming close, and I was initially happy to see it coming close, until it started coming out of the water. At that moment, my friends from the hill said, "I would start running if I were you. Oh, and don't worry, we will do a video as proof that you only defended yourself if the seal gets too close." There was obviously no harm to the seal nor myself. It was fun in a way, but in that exact moment when that big mammal came out of the sea, I got scared. I was with my son, autistic, in Nassau and was approached by a guy selling handmade toys. He came up to give his spiel. I asked him not to give the toy to my son because he might mess it up. I had already had to pay for a magnet he grabbed and accidentally broke. The guy stopped and said, "It's okay, he can have the toy. My brother is like him." It brought tears to my eyes to see someone so kind. My son was really overstimulated at that point, so I thanked him and took the toy. It made our day. On my last night in Munich, I needed to buy tampons. The only package in the store contained 100 OBs. I only used a couple, but miser that I am, I refused to leave the rest behind. My suitcase was full, so I stuffed them in the side pockets in my carry-on. Fast forward to the airport security line. A brusque guard grabs my bag and starts to unzip it. I cautioned him, which seemed to set him off. With gusto, holding the bag in the air, he tugged on the zipper, sending dozens of tiny white bullets soaring through the air. Some landed on other people. I'll never forget security on their hands and knees trying to pick them all up. I was at a guest house in rural Vietnam when the power went out at 9 p.m. and didn't come back. The owner appeared with a lantern, led me and 3 other guests to the roof, and produced an enormous pot and a gas burner. We sat up there for 4 hours, eating whatever she cooked in batches, while insects flew into the lantern and the valley below was completely dark. Nobody had planned this. None of us knew each other 2 hours before. There was a French couple who'd been fighting all day and stopped somewhere around the second pot. A solo guy from New Zealand who barely spoke at dinner, but turned out to be very funny once the lights were out. By the time the power came back on, nobody moved. The owner turned the lights off again from the switch by the stairs, and we stayed up there until midnight. Travel has a way of pulling the floor out from under you right when you think you've got your footing, and somehow that's always the part you remember. Not the itinerary, not the hotel, the moment that made no sense and stayed with you anyway. We'd love to hear yours. What's the one thing that happened to you on a trip that you still can't fully explain or still can't stop thinking about?
A friend once called the wrong number, got the wrong house, and had the right person pick up. So I was at work, replacing a modem for my boss. I'd removed the modem and connected a telephone to test that it had dial tone. Soon after, the phone rang. It didn't make much sense because that phone line had only been used for outgoing calls from the computer. When I picked up, the person on the other line just said, "Hey man, you want to see a movie later?" I recognized the voice, too. It was a friend of mine. I was really confused for a second and said something like, "Josh, how did you get this number?" He said he called my home phone number. He must have misdialed my number and accidentally dialed the number from my boss's modem line at work. He called the wrong number, got the wrong house, and the right person picked up, on a phone that had only been connected for 2 minutes in the past 2 years. The odds must be astronomical. It's just a weird coincidence that I'll always remember. Do you know the difference between good sitcoms and second-rate ones? Due to the fact that there is not always enough money for screenwriters, not-so-original scenarios and jokes are often used in the second kind of shows. As a result, we understand that this or that plot twist is completely unnatural, and of course this never happens in real life. We honestly don't know who writes the scripts for our lives, but it seems that this guy also sometimes uses hackneyed plot moves. We can all agree, each of us has had some moments in our lives when things happened that no one would have believed if told. There's a recent popular thread in the Ask Reddit community whose topic starter asked the question, "What's a funny memory you have that if you told someone, they'd think you're lying?" The result was almost 33,000 upvotes and nearly 10.7K different comments, which prove that our life is sometimes very much like a sitcom. Bored Panda made a list of some of the most amusing, incredible, and sometimes bizarre stories from this thread for you. These tales are simply unbelievable, but at the same time, they are completely true. So feel free to scroll to the very end and be sure to write what you liked the most.